All right, welcome into another Deep Dish Sports video interview. And joining me, as always, Mike Carmin from the Lafayette Journal and Courier. And Mike, it's March 1st. It's already had 2 months of this year, so that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I would say 2 months of 2021 has been better than 12 months of 2020.
Right. That is 100% true. Friday night, Purdue went into the game at Penn State as an underdog and came away with a 20-point win. They had a big lead in the first half. Penn State came back. I don't know if they tied it. They got within a couple points or whatever it was, and then Purdue kind of pulled away obviously and won by 20 points. We talked that maybe Penn State could give them trouble, and obviously they did for a little while. But it was great to see Purdue on the road taking care of business and stepping on the throats of Penn State, so to speak, and not leaving it to any doubt in the second half.
Yeah, I think that's what you wanted to see from this team in this particular case, because they'd had a week off, at least from playing games. So they should have been refreshed, which they were, which showed, I think, early in the game. And they came out with a strong start, built a lead. Penn State came back, but then there was that stretch at the end of the first half where Purdue got a couple steals from Stefanovic. Jaden Ivey had a dunk after he turned the ball over. Everything was spurred by their defense in that stretch, and he had a 15-point lead. And even though Penn State made a little bit of a run in the second half, Purdue was matching them offensively, and then just kind of maintained it from there. But yeah, this is what you wanted to see from this team against that kind of opponent after having time off, and just how refreshed they looked, how had a lot of bounce in their step, and they took care of business, and they're still moving in the right direction.
We got Wisconsin tomorrow night. We're recording this on Monday. But talking about taking care of business, I think when Purdue had a few down years, where they obviously had great years, and then they had those couple down years where it last the Big Ten in 14 or whatever it is, and slowly building their way back up. It seemed like one thing that was always good was to see these non-conference games at the beginning of the season, Purdue taking care of business against teams they should be, that they didn't do for those 2 years. Now, same thing in the Big Ten, like you said, against Penn State, you got to. The Illinois and Michigans of the conference don't. I mean, obviously anything can happen. We all know that. But more times than not, those teams take care of the good teams take care of the bad teams. That's exactly what happened, and that's a nice little springboard into tomorrow night against Wisconsin. Wisconsin team that, as is mentioned, that they have the same players. They're the same team, as last year, and. Everyone gets better usually over time as you get older, generally speaking. But what do you think? I guess your overall thoughts of the game tomorrow night? I don't know if Purdue's favored. I have not looked, but what do you kind of expect from tomorrow night?
Well, I mean, Purdue's at home, and they've played pretty well at home. Wisconsin, I guess by the record and the recent stretch is struggling, but you also look at who they've lost to. During the stretch, they've lost to some of the teams above them in the Big Ten standings, which is no different than Purdue. Just Purdue lost those games a lot earlier in the season. Right. Exactly. But Purdue's playing well, and I think they're playing well enough to beat Wisconsin, because other than Trice, there's one guy that can go. He's the one guy that can go off against you. And if you look back. The Penn State game, the Nebraska game, maybe not as much in the Michigan State game, but in some other games, the Northwestern game comes to mind, where the other team's leading scorer just has not had a typical game against Purdue. Myron Jones did. I think he may have got to double digits Friday for Penn State, but it came late when the game was decided. Teddy Allen didn't do much against Purdue out at Nebraska. Now he's left the team, but I don't think that's the reason why.
It had enough.
Yeah, and then I think you go to Northwestern with their leading scorer really didn't get going in that game, and whether it's specifically by design or whatever, I'm sure some of it is, where you're focusing your defensive efforts on shutting down the guy that you think can beat you. And I think that's what Purdue has done here recently. And we'll see what happens with Trice on Tuesday. But if you can, a lot of coaches say you got to cut off the head of the snake, and Trice would be the head of the snake in this case. That if you do that, then there's not many other players on that team that you feel like they could beat you. But I think Wisconsin's got some guys that can, and they're a well-balanced team. They have kind of struggled to score a little bit this year. I like kind of where Purdue's offense is at right now, playing inside out, which they've done all year, and was mentioned today in the Zoom press conference. Purdue scored a lot of points in the paint. That's not just Travion and Zach Edey. That's Jaden Ivey getting in the lane. That's other guys getting in the lane and scoring. And you're getting more than half your points there. That's a good sign, and that should free up some perimeter shooting. So, I like Purdue in this matchup to maybe come out on top. But I think it'll be a kind of a knockdown, drag out type of game, because Wisconsin likes to play that way, and Purdue's shown it can play that way, and would be more than willing to do it on Tuesday.
I remember some of the old Bo Ryan teams, some Wisconsin games, you first team to 45 wins, or whatever that would be.
Right.
That was those are some very good Wisconsin teams. Obviously, there's no Frank Kaminsky, there's no Alonzo Tucker. There's none of those guys on this team, regardless of how Trice is. He's still not at that level with Josh Gosser. That team, those kinds of Wisconsin teams, I would have to agree that as long as Purdue does what they do, what they have been doing, there's really no reason they should not win this game or the next game against Indiana on Saturday, and then going into the Big Ten tournaments. Yeah, I
just think Purdue has they've come too far to kind of take a step back now. Now the other team can dictate that. We saw when they played Michigan, it wasn't as much that Purdue played poorly. It's just Michigan played very well, and Michigan's a really good team. And I think sometimes fans forget the other team does practice. They do prepare. They go through the same thing Purdue goes through every game, and sometimes they're just better. And in Michigan's case, that was better. And if you go back to the beginning of the year, Iowa was better than Purdue on that night. Rutgers was better, even though Purdue had a legitimate shot to win that game. And you can go to Illinois and so on and so forth. But I just think Purdue has come too far to take a step back on its own. I think they're going to have to, if another team is really good on that night, whether shooting the ball or playing really good defense, then you just kind of move on from there. But, I think Purdue has built to this point that there's still a lot of improvement for this team. There's really no ceiling for this team right now. It can go as far as it wants, as high as it wants, this year. And I still think there's a lot more growth left in them.
I think with some of the teams in the past, it was, obviously with Carson, outside that game, Ryan Klein obviously had against Tennessee. You think, going into that, it was like, if Carson's not getting his, it's going to be tough for Purdue to win. I know this team is a lot different from that team. You've got multiple scoring options, legitimate scoring options, not a guy that can score, 10 points, but there are multiple guys on this team that can score 20 points a night. And I don't know how often that's been in the past, but that only helps you obviously going into a tournament situation where you never know. Sasha may go 0 for 6 in the first round of the NCAA tournament. You've got Travion, you've got Jaden, you've got Brandon Newman who can score. You've got a slew of other guys that can pick up slack.
Well, and you've got guys that are coming off the bench now that are proven scorers. Right now, the way the starting lineup is constructed, Brandon Newman's going to come off the bench, which is a new experience for him this year. And I was hoping to talk to him today because I'd like to know last time he didn't start a game.
Yeah, that would be funny.
You got to go back to probably his freshman year of high school, maybe, where he didn't start a game. Because he was the only player to start every game before Friday night. But now you're bringing him off the bench. And the week before, when we were talking to Matt and the players, it was the difference between Sasha coming off the bench or Jaden Ivey coming off the bench, and what a luxury that is to have. Because I think Matt firmly believes, and it'd be hard to disagree with him, he probably has 7 or 8 guys on his team that you could put in the starting lineup and not feel bad about it. And you would feel like, okay, these guys are going to get us off to a good start and so on and so forth. But then you're going to bring some other guys off that can also provide a punch. And Newman can still be a guy that comes off the bench and provides a punch. Aaron Wheeler provides a punch now in different ways, through his defense and his rebounding. So Purdue has good depth right now that if one or two guys are having an off night scoring, you can plug some other people in there, and you don't think there's not going to be a drop off, or there shouldn't be a drop off. The issue comes when you would have like 9 guys having an off night. That would be the problem. So I think Purdue has a lot of weapons that they can turn to if guys are having off nights. And so they should be well positioned as they get into the postseason to deal with something like that.
Hopefully we'll get to talk before the IU game, but if not, IU has been, the last few years, they've been down, obviously.
Right.
And regardless, Purdue's taking advantage of it, and they've won these matchups. It's still a Purdue IU game and, all that jazz, but kind of expecting the same thing out of Saturday as maybe tomorrow, or, IU's not as good as Wisconsin, but still, still IU coming in Mackey.
Well, I think it's no secret how Purdue will defend IU. They're going to double Trace Jackson Davis like they have in every other meeting, and then force other people to hit threes or to make plays. It's going to be a pretty simple, it has been a pretty simple game plan in the past for Purdue. And I think Purdue just has right now a ton of confidence playing against IU. They feel like they're the better team, and they feel like they can go out and beat them. And that, if they can get ahead, dictate things like they did down in Bloomington in the first meeting, then, they feel like they can control the game. And that's not a cocky attitude. It's the way it's where the series is at right now. And IU's had moments in this series where it felt the same thing, that it was better than Purdue on those nights, and they went out and proved it and did it. And I think, Purdue's team right now, regardless of what happens Tuesday, I think is still in a good position to beat Indiana if they do the things that they've done in the past. So, Purdue should get out of this week at worst 1-1, but ideally 2-0, and then you get a few more days off before you have to play in the Big Ten tournament. And you're going to have to end, as Matt was saying today, you're going to play somebody, you're going to play a top 25 team,
yep,
regardless if you're the 5 or the 4. It's just you're going to play an elite team at some point in this tournament, because that's just the way the Big Ten has stacked up. But I do think Purdue's kind of ready for that, and I think they've kind of prepared themselves. And the schedule has been favorable at the end when it was kind of treacherous at the beginning. It's been favorable at the end. And, a lot of people are saying, and I've written it and talked about it, but, Purdue is playing its best basketball right now and does have a lot of momentum going into March. But Purdue playing its best basketball doesn't mean it can beat Illinois, Michigan, Iowa. Does that equate to that? We don't know that. Right. So far, they've beaten Ohio State twice, but Ohio State didn't have E.J. Liddell one game, and I think C.J. Walker the other game. So they played Ohio State twice when they haven't had a full roster.
And needed a buzzer beater, yeah.
Right. So, and teams are different now, but, Purdue is playing well for Purdue right now. And how that equates going into the Big Ten tournament, when it gets to the Big Ten tournament, we'll just have to see how that plays out.
It's just great that we're talking about whether they're going to be the 3 or 4 seed or the 5 seed and get a double bye, after going into this year. We talked about it last week, but going into the beginning of the year, there's no one. I'm sure there may be someone that thought Purdue was going to finish in the upper half. I don't know, maybe. But
I think as we said, I thought they had a chance maybe to finish high as 5th. That would be the ceiling, but as low as 10th.
Exactly. A lot of question marks.
I didn't think they'd get in the top 4. I didn't think they'd be in the bottom 4, but somewhere in that middle range, which may work out, may not. But they've definitely pushed ahead farther than I think a lot of people thought, or anybody that really took a hard look at it couldn't sit there and say they were going to be a top 4 team in the Big Ten this year. Now expectations are going to change next year. They're going to change right when this season is over. Once Purdue plays its final game, whether it's at whatever point in the NCAA tournament, Purdue plays its final game, the expectations for this team and this program change dramatically starting moments after that buzzer, and they should, and Purdue fans should embrace it. And I know Purdue fans traditionally they keep waiting for the hole to cave in and something bad to happen. But I would just say embrace this team going forward, embrace this program going forward, because they're going to be good. They have good players. They're bringing in more good players. And then after that, they're going to bring in more good players, and you're going to lose some good players. But
That's true.
you're going to, you've got a program here that's ready to get up there at the top of the Big Ten, stay there for a long time, and then make a lot of noise in the Big Ten tournament. But don't be scared of the expectations. Don't be worried about everyone saying good things about your team. It's just, it's what happens. Embrace it, enjoy it, because you don't know when it's going to happen again.
I wouldn't be surprised if next year next year this time we're sitting here talking about Purdue as a 1 or 2 seed in the tournament and legitimate Final Four talk with this team next year. I think that,
yeah. I mean, there's factors that go into it as far as health and other things, but
if all goes well, yeah.
I mean, because no 2 teams are alike. Just because of what we see this year doesn't mean we're going to see the same thing next year. You probably have a little bit of attrition from this team, and then you got new guys that you're bringing in. But yeah, I think this time next year, I think Purdue definitely should be vying for the conference championship in the regular season, definitely a top 4 seed in the Big Ten tournament, and then probably one of those top 16 seeds in the NCAA, but maybe as high as a 2 or somewhere in the 3 range. A lot of fact, I don't know their non-conference schedule yet. I don't know things like that, but I think you'll see more marquee opponents on it. They're going to challenge themselves like they always do. And the other part of it is the Big Ten is going to lose a lot of talented players from some other teams, which will create a pathway for Purdue to move up, assuming everybody that needs to stay stays.
Last thing, Michigan up to number 2 in the polls today. They bypassed Baylor, so it's Gonzaga. Obviously, they have not lost, and then Michigan. Michigan, I assume you've watched Michigan more than Gonzaga this year. Is this obviously they're going to be the favorite going to the Big Ten tournament, and the favorite just because of where they're seated and all that stuff to get to obviously the second weekend and beyond in the NCAA tournament. Do you think this Michigan team has national title legitimate? Do you think this is a legitimate team that can challenge Gonzaga, I guess?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I completely agree.
You can be saying more. I just do. I mean, I think, the big guy in the middle kind of rounds them out. They've got really good guards, and nothing seems to face them. They go on the road, they win at Ohio State. They're still in a position to win the regular season title, and, they're going to be the favorite in the Big Ten tournament. And they have all the pieces in place to do it. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked at the end of the year if they are cutting down the nets and they are winning the national championship. Gonzaga should be right there. But I do think that Michigan probably will be more battle tested going into the tournament based on who they've had to play in the Big Ten. And Gonzaga plays its conference just because that's who they have to play. That's who they are. And I know they tried to schedule a lot of games outside their conference, but game with Baylor got canceled because of COVID. But yeah, I would pick Michigan today to be one of those Final Four teams and have a legitimate chance to win it.
All right, tomorrow's game, late start tomorrow night. We've got a 9 o'clock Eastern, so that's great.
Hopefully it's the last one. I hate these.
So we get a 10:27 start. We get the last game that, the first 2 games are in overtime, and then it's like 11:05 Eastern tip-off for the first game of the NCAA tournament or something ridiculous like that. But 9 o'clock start tomorrow night, and I think the IU game is at 2 on Saturday.
2 o'clock on Saturday.
Okay, that's a lot more manageable, so we'll take that. All right, Mike, thanks for your time today, and we'll see you tomorrow night at Mackey.
All right, thank you.
All right, it's Mike Carmin, the Lafayette Journal and Courier.